Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons and love are told. Before I dive in, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you thinking long after they end. The day had started quietly, just as most of my birthdays had in recent years. I was 71, and solitude had become something of a companion to me. My small house stood on a quiet street where neighbors were polite but distant, and the only sound that morning was the faint hum of traffic from the main road. I had not expected much. Age teaches you not to. But as the clock edged toward noon, there was a knock at my door, and when I opened it, I found Victor, my only son, standing there with a grin stretched a little too wide across his face. In his hands was a glossy bag, the kind you only see in upscale shops, and inside, gleaming like liquid fire in a glass bottle, was a whiskey that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Happy birthday, Dad," Victor said, his voice carrying that mixture of charm and force he often used when he wanted to impress. He handed me the bag with a flourish, waiting for my reaction. I held the bottle up, the amber liquid catching the light. "You didn't have to," I murmured, though part of me felt a stir of pride. Whiskey was not just a drink to me, it was a ritual, a companion for long evenings when memories grew heavy. But this bottle was more than I expected. "It's nothing," he said quickly, waving a hand. "You deserve it. You've been good to me. To all of us." His words hung oddly in the air, too practiced, like lines from a poorly rehearsed play. Still, I smiled and thanked him, masking the unease crawling under my skin. Victor didn't stay long. He said he had a meeting, though it was Saturday. After he left, I sat at the dining table staring at the bottle. The label boasted of rare barrels and old craftsmanship. It felt almost ceremonial to imagine pouring myself a glass that evening, raising it to the silent walls, to the years that had passed in struggle and fleeting joy. As dusk folded over the city, I prepared a simple meal of fried fish and plantains and set the whiskey on the table beside my glass. I was just about to break the seal when my phone vibrated. It was a message from Liam, my grandson. Liam was 17, sharp-minded, with a way of seeing through shadows others ignored. We didn't speak every day, but when we did, his words always felt honest, untouched by the games adults so often play. His message was short. "Grandpa, don't drink the whiskey Dad gave you. Please promise me." I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. First I thought it was a joke. A cruel, misplaced attempt at humor from a boy who sometimes worried too much. But the words carried urgency. I could almost hear his voice trembling through them. I typed back, "Why?" The reply came quickly. "Just don't. I'll explain later. Trust me." The glass in my hand suddenly felt heavy. My mouth went dry, and a chill swept over me despite the warmth of the room. I stared at the bottle, its golden glow now sinister, almost mocking. Memories flooded back, arguments with Victor about money, his sharp accusations that I favored his sister Clara, his bitterness whenever I refused to cover another one of his debts. Could it be? Could my own son have handed me not a gift, but a death sentence wrapped in polished glass? I pushed the bottle away, my chest tight. The thought alone felt like betrayal so deep it stole my breath. I didn't drink that night. Instead, I paced the house, the echo of Liam's warning louder than the ticking clock on the wall. I remembered Victor's grin, the false warmth in his eyes. I remembered the way he said, "You deserve it," as if there were a hidden weight pressing on those words. Sleep did not come easily. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between disbelief and suspicion. Had Liam misunderstood something? Had Victor truly meant me harm? The questions gnawed at me like rats in the dark. By dawn, one thing was certain. I could not let this pass as a child's paranoia. I needed to know the truth. And if that truth was as grim as I feared, then Victor had underestimated the resilience of the father he sought to betray. The whiskey remained untouched on my table, a silent witness to the turning of tides between father and son. I woke up the next morning with a pounding in my chest, not from illness, but from the unease that had followed me through the night. The whiskey bottle was still sitting on my dining table, unopened, like an intruder that refused to leave. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, nor could I ignore it. The words Liam had sent me repeated themselves in my head. "Don't drink it. Trust me." I knew then that I had to face the possibility that my own son wanted me gone. I carried the bottle into the kitchen, wrapped it in brown paper, and tucked it into an old leather bag. By mid-morning, I was on my way to a small private laboratory across town. I had used their services once years ago, back when I suspected that a tenant renting one of my apartments was tampering with gas meters. The receptionist recognized me faintly, and after a few pleasantries, I explained I wanted a full chemical analysis of the liquid in the bottle. I tried to make my voice casual, but inside my heart was racing. "Give us a few days," the technician said, carefully taking the sample. "We'll call when it's ready." Those days stretched like years. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it might be them. In the quiet of my house, I revisited every memory I had with Victor. He had been a bright boy once, mischievous but quick-witted, always running ahead of his sister Clara. But as he grew older, money became his language of love and power. When he was 25, I paid off his gambling debt to keep him out of trouble. Later, I loaned him enough to start a business that failed within 2 years. I had bailed him out of more crises than I could count, and each time, I thought it would be the last. Yet the more I gave, the more resentful he became. One evening during those waiting days, I found myself replaying a memory that cut deeper than the rest. It had been just a year ago. Victor had come to me, tense and desperate, demanding that I adjust my will. "Dad," he said, his jaw clenched, "you know Clara doesn't need it the way I do. You've already given her stability. You should leave the bulk of everything to me. It's only fair." I had shaken my head. "Fairness isn't about need, Victor. It's about what's right. Clara may not be begging me for money, but she's been responsible with what she has. I won't punish her for your choices." The look in his eyes that day had unsettled me, cold, calculating, like a man measuring how to move his next piece on a chessboard. He hadn't spoken to me for weeks afterward. 3 days later, the call from the lab came. The technician's voice was calm but edged with concern. "Mr. Harold, we found traces of a sedative powerful enough that in the wrong dosage, it could stop the heart of an elderly man. If you had consumed this, it could have been fatal." I thanked him quietly, hung up, and sat there in silence. My hands were steady, but inside, the storm raged. The suspicion had become proof. My own son had tried to poison me. The whiskey, the fake smile, the words "you deserve it," they all came together now, not as a gift, but as a disguised weapon. I called Liam that evening. His voice was low, almost whispering. "I saw Dad with a man in the garage a week before your birthday. They were talking about money. I overheard Dad say something about it'll be quick, no one will know. I didn't want to believe it, Grandpa, but when I saw the whiskey I just knew. His courage to warn me had saved my life. I felt a wave of gratitude and sorrow. You did the right thing, Liam. You saved me. And I promise you, I'll make sure you're safe from this too." That night, I pulled out a locked chest from under my bed. Inside were years of financial records, receipts, letters, proof of every bailout, every loan, every time I had reached into my savings to rescue Victor. As I flipped through them, I felt the bitterness rise. My sacrifices had not earned gratitude, only betrayal. The next morning I called Margaret, my lawyer of 20 years. She had always been steady and sharp, the kind of woman who saw through deception before it even entered the room. When I explained everything, from the poisoned whiskey to Liam's warning, she listened without interruption. "This is attempted murder, Harold," she said finally, her voice clipped with restrained anger. "But I know you. You want justice, not scandal. What do you want me to do?" I took a deep breath. "I want to secure Liam's future. I want to make sure Victor never touches a cent of my estate. Can you help me do that?" Within a week, my will was rewritten. Margaret established an irrevocable trust solely for Liam. The funds, properties, and investments that I had built over decades would be his when he came of age, but inaccessible to Victor or his mother. My son's name was erased from the inheritance, his betrayal carved into the silence of that legal document. When Margaret slid the papers across her desk for my signature, I paused, pen hovering. This was more than ink on paper. It was the closing of a door, the final act of severing ties with a child I had raised and loved, but who had chosen greed over blood. I signed. Walking home afterward, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The poison had been discovered, the truth laid bare, the future secured for Liam. But one thing remained. Victor did not know that I knew. He still believed the bottle was his secret. And that silence, I realized, could become my weapon. Because if Victor thought he had fooled me, then I could decide when and how to let the truth strike him back. The weight of truth sat inside me like a burning coal. Hot enough to scorch but steady enough to hold. I went about my days as though nothing had changed, but every time the phone rang or footsteps sounded on my porch, I thought of Victor. He moved through the city like a man sure of his own cleverness, convinced he had played the perfect hand. What he didn't know was that I was holding the ace. I decided the confrontation had to be deliberate. Not an outburst, not some heated exchange in the middle of the street, but something that would make him see, in no uncertain terms, that I had been one step ahead. I chose a Saturday evening, the same kind of quiet evening when he had handed me the poisoned whiskey. I called him, my voice calm, and told him I wanted to talk about my will. There was a pause before he answered. Finally, he said, his voice laced with triumph. I'll come by tonight. I set the stage carefully. On the dining table, I placed the whiskey bottle, but not the same one. The original poison sat locked away in a drawer as evidence. On the table was a twin I had purchased from a specialty store with the same label, same glow, but pure and clean. I poured 2 glasses and waited, the silence of the house echoing with anticipation. When Victor arrived, he wore his confidence like a mask. He greeted me with exaggerated warmth, his eyes flicking immediately to the bottle. So you finally decided to open it, he said, chuckling as though the past weeks had never happened. Sit down, Victor, I told him, sliding one of the glasses across the table. I watched as he lifted it, swirling the amber liquid before taking a generous sip. The satisfaction in his eyes was sharp, almost smug. I waited until the glass was nearly empty before speaking. You know, I had this tested, I said softly, my gaze steady on him. The glass froze midway to his lips. His smile faltered, his hand trembling just slightly. Tested, he repeated, trying to feign confusion. Yes, I said, leaning forward. The bottle you gave me for my birthday. It wasn't whiskey you were gifting me, Victor, it was poison. Strong enough to stop a man's heart. His face was drained of color. He set the glass down too quickly, the sound sharp against the wood. That's ridiculous, Dad. Why would I? Because you wanted me gone, I interrupted, my voice firm but calm. Because you thought my estate should be yours, and that by slipping me out of the picture you could secure it. You've been desperate for years, and desperation makes men foolish. The silence stretched, and then with a shaky laugh, he dropped the pretense. All right. Fine. I was drowning, Dad. You don't understand. The debts, the collectors, they're everywhere. I thought if I could just get ahead, I could fix everything. And you've always favored Clara. Always made me feel like I had to beg for scraps. Scraps, I said, my voice breaking with restrained anger. I gave you everything. I pulled you out of holes you dug for yourself. I covered your debts, paid for your dreams, kept your failures from crushing you. And this is how you repay me, by handing me a glass of death on my birthday. He buried his face in his hands, muttering, I didn't know what else to do. I stood then, my hands firm on the edge of the table. What you've done, Victor, is lose me. You will not see another cent from me. My will has been rewritten. Every penny, every piece of land, every investment, none of it will ever pass through your hands. Liam will be cared for, but not you. You are cut off, not because of your failures, but because you chose betrayal. He looked up at me then, his eyes wide, filled with a mix of fear and disbelief. You can't do that. I already have, I said. And more than that, I have proof. The poison bottle, the lab results, even Liam's testimony. If I wanted, I could walk into the police station tomorrow and end this with a cell door closing behind you. The only reason I haven't is because I want Liam to have at least one parent left outside prison walls. But you will not set foot in my house again. For a moment, I saw the boy he once was, the child who used to sit on my shoulders, laughing at the world. But that boy was gone, buried beneath greed and bitterness. All that was left was a man who had chosen darkness. He stood slowly, pushing his chair back. You'll regret this, he said bitterly, his voice cracking. No, irrapliakiatli. The only regret here is that I raised a son who thought my death was the key to his salvation. He left without another word, the slam of the door echoing through the house like the final toll of a bell. I stood in the silence, my hands trembling, not from fear but from the weight of release. The confrontation was over. The truth was spoken, and the ties between us severed. In the days that followed I felt lighter, though sorrow still clung like a shadow. I spent more time with Liam, walking through the park, listening to his dreams of studying engineering, of building something lasting and good. I saw in him the hope that Victor had squandered, the promise of a future not poisoned by greed. And I knew I had done the right thing. The whiskey bottle remained locked away, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that betrayal can wear the face of family, and that vigilance can mean survival. But also, a reminder that justice, when delivered with patience and clarity, can protect the innocent and expose the guilty. Moral lesson. Life has a way of testing the bonds we hold dearest. Betrayal from strangers wounds us, but betrayal from family tears something far deeper. What I learned through this ordeal is that trust is a sacred gift, not something to be manipulated for greed or convenience. My son thought wealth was the measure of love, but in trying to take my life, he lost the very thing money cannot buy. My trust, my blessing, my presence. For my grandson, though the story is different, Liam's courage to speak up, even when it meant standing against his own father, became the light that guided me toward survival. It reminded me that goodness still exists, sometimes where we least expect it, and that protecting that goodness is worth every sacrifice. So to those listening, guard your heart, but never let bitterness be your guide. Justice does not always require rage. Sometimes the quiet decisions we make shape legacies far more powerful than anger ever could. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what lesson stood out most to you today.